Hi, and welcome to this short video about completing the final fieldwork evaluation for your student. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to think about completing the final fieldwork evaluation, whether you use the official form from the association or whether you have your own form that you use. There's similar things to think about in both. So one of the things to think about is that there shouldn't be any surprises in the final evaluation. The student, if they have any concerns and there's things that they need to work on, this should have been addressed all along the way so that the student is well aware of their areas of concern and their areas of strength by the time they get to the final evaluation. When you go over those things, it should be a summarization and sort of taking everything into consideration to this point. So all along you've had trouble with this and this, but you've grown here and this has become better there, and you've made lovely strides here. So altogether, you're here. So sort of summarizing and looking at the growth that's happened over the course of the weeks that the student has been with you is a much more effective way of doing the evaluation. If the evaluation is cold and the student hasn't had lots of information and feedback along the way, it's going to be a surprise to them and they're not going to understand why you're giving them the grades that you're giving them. So we strive always for it not to be there to be any surprising information. It should all be understood all along the way, their strengths and their weaknesses. One of the other things to think about is what number you give students. What score are you going to give them on each of the items on the evaluation? Different people, some people that I've talked to say they never give fours because there's always room to grow and I never want to give someone the highest grade. On the other hand, other people say, well, when I have a great student, I want to let them know, so I definitely want to give them fours. One of the things to think about is, what does this four mean to you? What does the highest score mean to you? You want to read the definitions of them on the form, but you also want to really think in the context. The goal here is for the student at the end, if they pass, to be functioning as a brand new therapist. So that's the competency that we're looking for. We're not looking for excellence as a therapist of a year, 2 years, 4 years, whatever. We're looking for somebody who can meet the competency of being an entry-level therapist. So try to keep that in mind. And keep in mind also the overall score. So I have had experiences where a fieldwork educator will give a student twos and threes throughout because that's what they think is appropriate, and then the student barely passes. But the comments are all glowing and positive, and the student did a great job, and they were awesome, and they'll be a great therapist, and I would hire them in a minute, and all kinds of lovely comments. But that doesn't match with the overall score. They just squeak by because the fieldwork educator doesn't want to give them any high grades because they want to give them room to grow. Well, that gives the student really confusing information. There's really lovely comments, but there's kind of a just passing score. So kind of think about that as well, and what do you want that to look like in the end? Next thing to remember is that there is a focus inherent in the fieldwork evaluation on safety and ethics, and students must meet a minimum standard of ethics and safety. So that is definitely has to be a focus all the way through the fieldwork. And if a student is having ethics and safety issues throughout, you need to warn them early on, hey, look, these are big no-goes. And if you perform in a way that compromises ethics or patient safety, it's really not going to go well for you. So you need to make sure that you focus on that, and you need to make sure that by the time the student finishes, they're competent in those areas. So another thing to think about is areas of growth in your comments. So a student might still not be a four, but they may have gone from a one to a three or a two to a three in an area like in assessments, for example. They may have been not good at following protocols and all of that for doing an assessment, but they got better. They got better at it. So make your comments reflect those growth areas, and that will help the student know where they still need to grow. So if you say, previously students struggled with XYZ and now they're doing better, I would recommend continued focus on. It's fine to say, and to let students know where they still need to work. But acknowledging their areas of growth is important and helps students understand their path through the fieldwork. One of the most upsetting things for a lot of students is when they get grades and no comments. They may have passed just barely or nicely, but zero comments. And I know that fieldwork educators are super busy clinicians, but when you take on a student, you also take on the responsibility of evaluating them carefully. So those comments are really, really important for students, both at midterm, but also at the final. I see a lot more comments on midterms than I do on finals, but students really are seeking that feedback. They really want it. So please take the time, make the time if you can, to give nice, detailed comments for the students, both at midterm and at final. It is really what they're looking for. And that's what's going to help them grow as new therapists. And you want to think about when you're looking at this is a competency based assessment, right? Essentially, you're looking at the fieldwork competencies that we expect of a new entry level therapist. And does this student meet them in all these different areas in professionalism and safety and ethics and clinical skills and all of that? So you have to really step back before you complete it and think about what does competence for a new therapist look like at my facility? How have I seen other brand new therapists walk in the door in this facility and what do they look like? And that's what you're measuring against. One nice tool and nice way to manage the fieldwork assessment is to have the students score themselves and you score them and then compare. It's a really nice area for growth, and it's a nice way to have a conversation with the student about the areas that they're working on in growth. And hopefully you're both on the same page, but there may be some differences. Most likely the differences are the student doesn't appreciate how well they've done in certain areas that they're strong in. I tend to see students downplay their strengths. And so it's a nice opportunity for the fieldwork educator to say, no, actually, you're not just okay there. You do really well there. That's great. So it's a nice place for you to be able to have that conversation with the student. So this opportunity to go over the evaluation after you've completed it is a time to give the student feedback, but it's also a time for you as the fieldwork educator to solicit feedback from the student. So the students usually will fill out a feedback form of some sort, but it's also nice during that going over the assessment for you to say, how was I as a fieldwork educator? Did I structure my time well? Would you have liked more feedback, less feedback? How do you feel about how our communication was? Did I give you opportunities for learning? So it's a really nice opportunity to get feedback about yourself as a fieldwork educator and so that you can grow as well. So again, considering as an opportunity for you and the student to grow and learn is sort of a really nice way of thinking about doing the final evaluation. And there's some documents in this module that will help you think about it a little bit more. And thank you very much for listening.